The human vessel Horizon's call drifted at the edge of known space, its steel hull reflecting faint glimmers of distant stars. And inside, the crew waited in silence. Every person aware that they stood at the border of history, a line no one had dared to cross, the Galactic Barrier. A shimmering wall of energy that divided the safe star systems from the unknown void. Captain John Carter stood at the helm, his hands steady, though his heart beat fast. He had seen battles, he had fought storms in space, but this was different. There was no enemy to see, no weapon to fire. Just a wall of energy that could either let them pass or crush them into nothing. He turned to his crew, Helena Brooks, the navigator with sharp eyes and steady calm, Ethan Ward, young and curious, always asking questions, Oliver Grant, strong and stubborn, the one who believed no mission was impossible, and Maria Sullivan, quiet but brilliant, her fingers dancing over controls as though they were alive. Each of them carried a mix of fear and excitement. No human ship had crossed the Galactic Barrier. Alien races spoke of it only in hushed tones. They called it cursed. They said those who entered never returned. Stories of ships swallowed by light, of voices screaming in the dark, but humanity was never a race to step back from danger. Exploration was in their blood, and so Horizon's call had been chosen for this mission. Its engines tuned, its shields strengthened, but even the best technology could not guarantee survival. John's voice echoed through the bridge, calm but firm. Steady course, we move in. His words cut through the silence, and the crew obeyed. The ship glided forward, its nose aimed at the vast curtain of energy ahead. The barrier rippled like a living thing. Shifting colors, blue to violet to white. The sensors screamed with unreadable data. Maria frowned, whispering, "This isn't just energy, it's something else." But there was no time to analyze. The wall grew larger, closer, and soon it filled the entire view. Helena tightened her grip on the console, her eyes fixed forward. She had charted dangerous routes before, but this was unlike anything she had seen, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Once we enter, there's no going back." Ethan, barely older than 20, swallowed hard, his excitement now mixed with dread. What if we find something no one else has? What if humanity becomes the first to map beyond? Oliver gave a dry laugh, though it sounded more like a cover for his nerves. Or maybe we'll be space dust in a second. The barrier loomed, brighter and brighter, until it was no longer just in front of them, but all around, like a horizon swallowing the stars. The hull vibrated as though warning them to stop. Alarms flared, lights flickered, yet John's expression never broke. He had made peace with risk long ago, and if this was to be their last voyage, he would face it with eyes open. Then the ship touched the barrier, and everything changed. A surge of light consumed the bridge, dazzling white so intense it blinded them. The crew gasped as they felt a pressure inside their heads, as though the barrier itself had noticed them. Reality twisted, screens went blank, and every sense screamed that they had been ripped apart, yet somehow, impossibly, they remained. They were alive, though not untouched. Helena shouted over the noise. "The ship is holding," but her voice trembled. Ethan clutched his chair, his knuckles white. "This isn't just energy. It feels like something watching us." Maria tried to steady the sensors, but all readings showed impossibilities, negative energy, reversed gravity, signals that no science could explain. Oliver's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to John. "Captain, this is madness. We need to turn back." But there was no turning back. Not anymore, for as the ship pushed deeper into the barrier, each member of the crew felt it, the undeniable sense that they were no longer alone. Whispers brushed against their minds, faint and unclear, like echoes from ancient voices. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, and the walls of the ship groaned. the hall straining not against pressure, but against something far greater. John gripped the controls tighter, forcing his fear down. "Hold steady, all of you," he said. But deep in his chest, he felt the truth. This mission was not exploration, it was intrusion. They had not crossed into empty space. They had crossed into something forbidden, something alive, and as the barrier's last light faded behind them, the universe ahead opened into silence. No stars, no galaxies, only a void stretching forever. And in that silence, a single pulse throbbed, deep and powerful. Like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient, the crew sat frozen, their eyes wide. Their hearts pounding, they had crossed the galactic barrier, and in doing so, they had awakened something that had waited in the dark for longer than humanity had existed. And though none spoke it aloud, they all knew the truth, their lives, their mission. And perhaps the galaxy itself would never be the same again. The crew of Horizon's Call sat in silence after the crossing, their eyes wide as they stared out. The windows, expecting to see stars, galaxies, maybe strange new suns. But instead, there was nothing. The blackness stretched forever. It was not the normal dark of space filled with faint light. This was emptiness, so heavy it felt alive. The stars they had left behind were gone, replaced by a void that pressed. Against their minds, Helena was the first to break the silence, her voice soft but firm. "Captain, I see signals." Her hands moved quickly over the navigation console, her eyes narrowing as she tried to focus on the strange pulses. They were faint at first, just small ripples in the darkness, like stones dropped in an endless ocean, but they grew clearer the longer she listened, rhythmic, repeating, too exact. To be random, Maria leaned over her station, her brow furrowed. "This isn't natural noise," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "It's a pattern, like a language." She adjusted the frequency, her screen filled with strange symbols no one could recognize. Lines and spirals, echoes of something ancient. "This is not stars. This is a message," she whispered, her hands shaking as she realized it was older than any human database could recognize. Ethan leaned forward, excitement and fear mixing. In his young face, "A message means someone, or something, is here," he said. His voice half whisper, half laugh. But there was no joy in it. Maybe it's a civilization hidden beyond the barrier. Maybe he stopped as the pulse echoed again, louder now, vibrating in the very walls of the ship. Each beat strong like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Oliver crossed his arms, his face pale, though he tried to look steady. Or maybe, "We just stepped into a trap," he said bluntly. "Aliens talk about this barrier like it's cursed. Maybe now we know why." He glanced at John, his captain, looking for any sign of hesitation, but John stood tall. His eyes locked on the black void outside he was listening to, and he felt it in his bones. This was not a call. This was a stirring, something waking. The air on the ship grew heavy, as though the void outside had seeped in, lights dimmed without. Reason, systems flickered, the hum of the engines faltered. The crew exchanged nervous glances, and then they all heard it, faint but unmistakable whispers. Not through their ears, but inside their minds, soft, broken, and old. Ethan covered his ears instinctively, even though he knew the sound wasn't coming from the room. "Do you hear it?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "They're saying something." Maria's eyes darted to the readings again, her voice dropping to a whisper. "No. It's not talking to us. It's talking to itself. Like a dream, like someone asleep." Helena froze, her fingers hovering over the navigation keys, her lips barely moving. "Then what if we woke it up?" Her words hung heavy in the air, and silence followed. The pulses grew stronger, each one sending vibrations through the hall. The crew's hearts beat in rhythm without meaning to. every throb of that strange signal shaking. Them deeper, like they were being pulled into something ancient. Ethan's excitement was gone now, replaced with fear. "Captain," he whispered, "what if this isn't a place we found, but a prison? What if we're inside something that was locked away?" John finally spoke, his voice steady, though his chest was tight. "Whatever this is, we're in it now, and there's no turning back." He looked around at his crew. Meeting each of their eyes, "We hold together, no matter what, but deep." Inside, even he could not deny the cold truth crawling through his thoughts. This was no discovery. This was intrusion, and the signals were not calling them. They were warning them. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, alarms wailed, and every light flickered as though struggling to stay alive. Maria screamed, "Systems are failing. The core is draining energy into the void." Her hands moved desperately over the controls, but nothing stopped the bleed. As though the blackness itself was feeding on the ship, Helena gripped the edges of her console, holding steady though. Her eyes betrayed fear. "Captain, this isn't space. It's alive. It's reacting to us." Then came the moment that froze them all. The pulse that had been distant suddenly boomed inside their skulls, so loud and strong it knocked Ethan from his chair. They all felt it, not sound, not sight, but the sensation of something massive rolling in its sleep, stretching, opening its eyes, and the whispers stopped, replaced by silence so deep it hurt. Maria's voice cracked as she whispered, "It's awake." The words felt like a blade cutting through the bridge, and none of them argued. They all felt it. The barrier was not a wall to keep humans out. It was a wall to keep something else in. And now, because of them, it was stirring. John's hands gripped the console tighter. His jaw set. He knew humanity had always been reckless explorers. But for the first time, he wondered if they had gone too far. And yet, deep inside, another thought burned brighter. Maybe, just maybe, it was better that humanity had been the ones to awaken this ancient force. For unlike the civilizations that had vanished before, humans had a history of facing the impossible and fighting back. The void trembled again. The pulses beating faster, no longer distant, but close. So close they felt it in their bones. The crew of Horizon's Call braced themselves, knowing they had crossed into something far older than their species, something that remembered being feared, something that was hungry, and as the darkness pressed closer against the glass, each of them realized a terrifying truth. They were no longer explorers. They were witnesses to an awakening that might shake the galaxy itself. The crew of Horizon's Call had lost all sense of time inside the void. Hours felt like days, and days felt like moments. No one could tell how long they had been drifting. They tried to keep the ship steady, but the stars outside never returned. There was only the endless black stretching forever. The strange pulses had stopped now, replaced by a silence that weighed heavier than steel. John stood at the center of the bridge, his hands gripping the edge of the command seat, his face set in stone, though his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. The others worked restlessly around him, Maria whispering to the machines, Helena trying to adjust their course even though the instruments refused to obey, Oliver cursing under his breath as he checked the hull integrity for the 100th time, and Ethan, restless, staring wide-eyed at the void. "Captain," Ethan said finally, his voice low, "I think it's not outside anymore. I think it's here, with us." Before John could answer, the ship trembled. Not from an impact, but from something deeper. A thudding vibration that rolled through every surface. Like the sound of a massive drum, Maria clutched her headset and gasped. "That's not mechanical. That's biological." Her words made the air colder. The sound came again, steady and strong. The hull itself seemed to pulse with it, like a heartbeat. The lights flickered, then flared into a strange glow, not from the ship's systems, but from outside. the void, was no longer empty. Shapes of light flickered into existence. Enormous patterns that spread across the black. First faint lines, then glowing curves. Until the darkness around them was filled with colossal outlines. Helena's breath caught. In her throat, her voice trembling. Those aren't stars. That's something alive. The shapes shifted, forming massive limbs. Endless arcs of energy, like the silhouette of a being larger than planets. Its form too vast to see fully. Only hints of movement in the dark. A shiver ran through every. Hard on the ship, Ethan stumbled back, his voice cracking. We didn't discover it. We woke it up. John's jaw tightened, his mind racing. He had seen many dangers in his life. Pirates, storms, battles with alien raiders, but never something like this. The crew looked to him for answers. A T, and all he could do was stand tall and meet their fear with calm. We hold steady, no matter what, he said firmly, though the words shook deep inside him. Then the crew felt it, not in their ears, but in their minds. A brush like fingers pressing into their thoughts, heavy, suffocating. A presence older than anything they had ever imagined. It wasn't words, it was feelings hunger. Curiosity, anger, and amusement, all crashing together. Maria clutched her chest as if she could push it out. Oliver snarled and gripped the railing. Forcing his will against it, Helena froze in her chair. Her eyes wide as if she could see something just beyond sight. The entity did not speak, yet it showed them visions. Flashes burned into their minds, stars being born and dying. Fleets of ships burning in waves of fire. Civilizations bowing in terror. Planets shattered into dust. They saw 1,000 histories of alien races crushed under an invisible hand. Each image like a knife cutting into their thoughts. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. It's showing us what it is. He whispered, it's death. It's older than time. John forced his voice through the weight pressing on his chest. Fight it. Don't give in. It wants us to be afraid. He knew fear was what it fed on. It was what it expected. Yet as he spoke, he felt the pressure increase. The walls of the ship groaned as if they would split apart. Then came the moment that froze them all. The void around them shifted, and stars appeared. Tiny points of light blinking into existence where before there had been none, but they weren't natural. They flickered in patterns, rearranging themselves into shapes, as though the very fabric of reality was being rewritten. The being's thoughts swept through them again, and they understood it wasn't just awake. It was shaping the space around them, bending it to its will. Helena gripped the console, sweat dripping down her face. Captain, it's rewriting space, this whole place. It belongs to it, she said, her voice breaking. Maria's fingers moved desperately over the controls. We're losing power faster than we can hold it, straining us. Oliver slammed his fist on the panel. Then what do? Fight a god. John looked at each of them, their faces pale, their breaths short, the fear in their eyes growing with every second. But within him, something hardened. Humanity had always stood against impossible odds. They had faced storms, wars, and endless enemies. And now, maybe, they were the only ones reckless enough to face this. We don't bow, John said, his voice sharp. We hold. We fight. If it wants to know what we are, then it'll learn. The entity pulsed again, louder, its presence digging deeper into their minds. Testing them, its hunger wrapping around their souls. But there was also something else. An edge of surprise. As though it hadn't expected resistance, the crew braced themselves, their ship trembling as though it might tear apart. And in that moment, they all understood one terrible truth. They hadn't stumbled into a discovery, they had stumbled into an awakening. And now, the galaxy itself would never be the same. The bridge of Horizon's call felt colder than space itself. Every breath of the crew came in short bursts, and though the walls of the ship were still intact, it felt as if something massive had stepped inside with them. It was not sound, it was not light, but a pressure in their minds, and then it began to speak, not with words, but with images and emotions that burned themselves into their thoughts. John saw it first, flashes of endless battles, alien fleets breaking apart like paper before a wave of fire. He saw proud civilizations falling to their knees in worship, their faces twisted in fear, planets breaking, suns dimming. He saw the rise and death of empires that no history remembered. And through it all, one constant, the presence that now loomed over them, vast and ancient. Ethan gasped as the images filled his head, clutching at his skull as though he could tear them out. "It's asking something," he cried, his voice breaking. "It wants to know who we are, why we came here." Helena sat frozen in her chair, her hands gripping the console so tightly her knuckles turned white. She too saw the visions, the demand behind them. Who dares disturb me? The force was not a voice, but it echoed in their bones like thunder. Maria fell against her station, her breath shaking. It's too strong. It doesn't see us as people, it sees us as insects. Oliver stood rigid, his teeth clenched, his fists tight against the railing. He had never known fear like this, but he would not let it crush him. He forced his voice to break through the silence. "We're not bowing to it." The entity pressed harder, its emotions heavy and suffocating. Hunger wrapped around them like chains, curiosity like sharp blades. And behind it all, a dark amusement. It had seen countless species before, and all had broken, all had yielded. But now it waited, expecting the same from these fragile humans. John's chest burned under the weight of it, but he drew in a long breath and forced his words into the open. "We came here because we are explorers," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "We don't bow, we don't kneel. We search for the unknown because it is in our nature." Helena turned her head toward him, her lips parted in shock. The captain's defiance carried like a spark through the air. The entity recoiled slightly, its pressure shifting. The crew felt it, not weaker, but surprised, as if it had not expected resistance. Ethan gasped, clutching his chest. "It heard you. It's listening." Maria shook her head, sweat rolling down her face. "No, it's not listening. It's playing with us." But even so, something in the void trembled. The ship groaned as if under enormous strain, yet it did not crush them. The crew's breaths came in ragged gasps, the air filled with a low hum that grew louder, not from the ship, but from inside their minds. John stood straighter, refusing to show fear. "We are human," he said again, his voice firmer. "We don't come here to worship. We come here to explore." Helena added her voice, soft but steady. "You may be ancient, but we are not afraid." Her words cracked slightly, but the strength behind them was real. Oliver slammed his hand on the console, glaring into the void beyond the glass. "If you want to crush us, then do it. But know this. We won't beg." Ethan, still trembling, forced himself up to his feet, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We stand, even if it kills us." For a moment, the presence swelled, anger pressing harder. And the ship's walls groaned, metal, bending as though it might snap, but then it slowed. And the feeling of hunger shifted. It was still there, but mixed with something else. Curiosity deepened. Almost respect. The crew could feel it, though their bones ached from the pressure. The void shimmered, distant stars flickered into view, and then vanished, as though the being was showing them its power. Maria whispered, her voice faint and terrified. "It could unmake us with a thought." John nodded, but his jaw was tight. "Then let it know that humans don't break, that is a lie." The entity pressed one last time, and in their minds came another flood of images. 1,000 races kneeling, empire shattered, galaxies bowing. But this time the visions did not bury them. The crew pushed back, holding their ground. And the pressure wavered. The being's curiosity sharpened. It had found something it had not seen in Ian's defiance. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the heavy weight lifted slightly. Not gone, never gone, but watching, waiting. The crew collapsed back into their seats, gasping, their faces pale, sweat dripping down their brows. Maria whispered weakly, "It didn't destroy us. It's toying with us." Helena shook her head, her eyes still fixed forward. "No, it's testing us." John breathed heavily, but a flicker of fire burned in his eyes, the first spark of hope in the suffocating dark. "Then we show it what humans are," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It may have crushed civilizations before, but it hasn't faced us." His words carried through the bridge, and each of them, though exhausted, felt their hearts steady. The void outside shifted again, vast shapes curling at the edge of vision, the presence circling them like a predator. But now it was no longer only hunger. It was interest, fascination. The humans had not fallen. They had spoken, they had defied, and the ancient force was listening. The silence after the contact was worse than the voices. The crew of Horizon's Call sat frozen in their seats, their bodies heavy from the pressure that had been inside their minds. The ancient force had not left. They could still feel it circling them like a predator. But now it was waiting, watching, testing. John knew it was only a matter of time before it crushed them unless they did something first. Maria wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands trembling as she scanned the consoles. "Captain, the systems are collapsing," she said in a weak voice. "Our core is draining into the void, like it's being pulled. If we don't stop it, the ship won't last an hour." Her words fell like stones in the silent bridge. Oliver slammed his fist against the railing. "So what? We just sit here and let this thing swallow us." His voice cracked with anger, but underneath was fear. Ethan, the youngest, leaned forward, his eyes wide with a desperate kind of hope. "Maybe we can fight it," he said quickly. "The quantum core, it was designed to link with unstable energy fields. What if we overload it against the thing's hold, turn its own pull back on itself?" Maria's head snapped up, shock on her face. "That's reckless if we miscalculate. The core could rip us apart." Ethan's voice shook, but he did not look away. "We're already dead if we do nothing." Helena studied him, then turned to John, her voice steady. "Captain, it's madness. But maybe madness is our only chance." John's eyes lingered on each of them. He saw the exhaustion, the fear, but also the fire. Humanity had always survived because they pushed when no one else would. He gave a slow nod. "Do it." His voice was calm, but carried the weight of finality. "Reroute the core. Prepare the overload. We fight back." Maria's fingers flew across the controls, our fear buried under focus. She rerouted power lines, disabling non-essential systems. The lights flickered, engines groaned. But energy poured into the quantum core. Ethan moved beside her, his hands shaking as he worked, sweat dripping down his face, aligning the resonance to the field outside. He muttered, "If this works, we'll hit it with everything we've got." Oliver strapped himself at the weapons console, even though he knew the guns were nothing. Against a being that bent space, he wanted to be ready. He wanted to feel he was not useless. The presence around them pressed harder. As though it had sensed their plan, the ship groaned, walls bending, alarms screaming. Helena gripped the console, her voice sharp. "It knows. It's trying to crush us before we act." John's voice cut through the chaos, strong and steady. "Hold on, don't stop. We're not prey." The hum of the quantum core grew louder, filling the bridge with a deep vibration that shook their bones. The presence slammed into their minds, filling them with visions, again this time of death. Of countless ships shattered, races begging for mercy. Of despair so deep it drowned hope, Ethan cried out, his knees buckling. But Maria grabbed his shoulder and shouted, "Focus, don't let it win." Then the moment came. The core screamed with energy, light flooding the ship. John gave the order. His voice firm, "Fire it." Ethan slammed his hand on the release. And the quantum surge exploded outward. The ship shook as if struck by 1,000 storms. The void outside rippled like water, and for the first time, the crew heard the ancient being scream, not in sound, but inside their heads. A shriek so powerful it nearly split their thoughts apart. Yet along with the pain came something else. Relief. The pull on their ship weakened. Systems flickered back to life. Distant stars cracked through the black like tiny fractures of light. Maria gasped, staring at her console. It worked. It actually worked. Helena's voice was steady, though her face was pale. We heard it. Ethan collapsed into his chair, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. We fought back. And we're still here. Oliver let out a short, rough laugh. First time in history, a human ship slapped a god, but his smile faded quickly. Because the pressure was not gone, the void trembled again. The presence still there, angry now. Burning with fury, it was not destroyed, only weakened. Its hunger deeper, sharper. John's chest tightened as he realized the truth. We've shown it something no one else did, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the shifting black outside. Resistance. The bridge fell silent. The crew felt it too. The being was no longer just toying with them. It was hunting them now, like a predator intrigued by prey that bit back. John drew in a long breath, his voice steady. We bought ourselves time, but it won't stop now. It wants to see how far. We'll go. The lights flickered again. Systems shuddered. The stars they had glimpsed vanished back into the void. The entity's presence wrapping around them tighter than before. Stronger, hungrier, Maria whispered, her voice hollow. We've made it angry. Helena shook her head, her eyes still locked forward. No. We've made it interested. And in that moment, as the ship groaned under the strain of forces it could barely withstand, the crew of Horizon's Call understood. They had done what no other race had dared. They had stood against an ancient power older than creation, and though it had not fallen, it now saw humanity not as dust, not as prey, but as a challenge, a game worth pursuing. John looked at his crew. Their faces pale but determined, and he knew there was no turning back. We've woken something that will never forget us, he said quietly, and now, we run, we fight, we survive, because that's what humans do. And as the hum of the engines roared again, carrying them deeper into the void, every heart on board burned with the same fire. They had resisted, they had survived, and they had declared themselves to the oldest force in existence. The quiet after the quantum blast was short. Horizon's Call drifted in the black as if it had escaped. But no one on the bridge believed they were safe. The crew sat in silence, their ears still ringing from the psychic scream of the being. They had struck. John stood tall at the center, his face grim. He knew it was not over. It was only beginning. Maria looked down at her console, her hands moving quickly, sweat dripping down her forehead. Captain, engines are running, but not for long, she said. We forced too much power into the core. It's overheating. Helena's eyes stayed fixed on the darkness outside, her voice soft but firm. It's still out there. I can feel it, like it's circling us. Ethan shivered, wrapping his arms around himself. We heard it, but now it's angry. What if it doesn't just want to destroy us? What if it wants to chase us, as if answering his words? The void rippled, the darkness around them bending and folding. Shapes of light flickered, vast and shifting, like the limbs of something. Too large to be seen fully, the ship trembled, alarms blaring. Oliver slammed his hand on the weapons console. "Here it comes," he growled, though he knew their weapons were useless. He wanted to be ready for the fight. John's voice cut through the chaos. Calm but sharp, all power to engines. "Helena, set a course, anywhere away from here." Helena's fingers flew across her controls, her heart racing. "There is no map, Captain. This place bends space like it's liquid." John's jaw tightened. "Then we run blind, but we run." The engines roared. Horizon's call pushed forward. Its hull groaning, space itself seemed to twist around them, corridors of broken light opening like tunnels. Lena gasped. "Captain, those aren't tunnels. They're wounds, cracks in space." Maria's voice cracked with fear. "We shouldn't even be alive in here." John's reply was steady. "But we are, so keep going." The ship dived into the glowing corridor, stars and fragments of galaxies, flashing past like broken glass. Behind them, the presence surged. The void bending as though the entire universe was chasing them. The crew could feel it in their bones. Not just pursuit, but fascination. It wanted them. Not to kill quickly, but to test, to see how long they could last. Ethan leaned close to the glass, his eyes wide as ruins drifted past, shattered remains of ships. Alien wrecks larger than cities, monuments broken into dust. "Look at them," he whispered. "Civilizations that tried before us, they didn't make it." Helena's voice was sharp. "Don't lose focus. We're not them. We're still moving." But even she felt the weight of those ruins pressing. On her heart, Maria scanned the wreckage, her voice tight. "These are thousands of years old. Maybe millions. It's been here forever. And it's been feeding on anyone foolish enough to cross," Oliver snarled, his fists tight. "And now it wants us for dessert." But even he could not hide the chill running down his spine. The entity struck, not with weapons, but with space itself. The corridor twisted, folding in on itself. Stars stretched into spirals. The ship was tossed like a leaf in a storm. Alarms screamed. Metal groaned. Helena fought the controls, her teeth gritted. "I can't hold it. It's tearing the path apart." John leaned over her, steady. "Hold as long as you can. Just long enough." Maria rerouted power, her fingers moving desperately. "I'll boost the engines with emergency reserves," she cried. "But after this, we'll be running on fumes." John gave a sharp nod. "Do it. We don't need tomorrow. We just need to live through today." The ship roared forward, sparks flying from the panels. The presence pushed harder. Visions flooding their minds again, this time not of the past, but of themselves. They saw the ship breaking apart. They saw their deaths. They saw their bones drifting in the void. Ethan shouted, clutching his head. "It's trying to scare us. It wants us to give up." John barked back, his voice cutting through. "Then don't give it what it wants. Keep fighting." The crew pushed on, the engines screaming, the corridor ahead flickering. Helena's voice cracked. "If we go any faster, the hull won't hold." Oliver bared his teeth, then let it break. Better than stopping. Maria's console flashed red, temperature rising any higher, and the core will melt. John's eyes narrowed. "Push it anyway." Suddenly, a blinding light flashed ahead, a tear in the void, a wound in space that glowed like a star. Helena gasped. "An exit or a trap?" John's voice was steady. "Doesn't matter. It's a chance." He looked around at his crew, their faces pale, exhausted, but unbroken. "Hold together. We make it." The ship plunged toward the light, the entity behind them shrieking with force that shook their very souls. The void folded tighter. The hull screamed as if it would split apart. Ethan cried out. "It's on us," Oliver growled. "Let it come. We're not stopping." Maria shouted over the alarms. "Core at critical. It's going to blow." John's voice cut through everything, sharp as a blade. Then let it blow behind us. Just hold. And then, with one last surge, Horizon's call burst through the tear. The light swallowing them whole. The ship thrown forward, every crew member clinging to their seats as the universe bent around them. For one blinding instant, there was silence. No screams, no pressure, no void. Only light. They had escaped, but deep in their hearts, they knew it was not over. The entity had not been defeated. It had only been delayed, and now it knew them. It had seen their defiance, tasted their resistance. It would not forget. It would never forget, Ethan whispered. Into the silence, his voice shaking. It's still coming, isn't it? John nodded slowly, his eyes hard. Yes, he said softly. And it won't stop, not until it's finished with us. But then he straightened, fire in his voice. So we give it something it's never had before. We don't stop either. And as the stars flickered faintly ahead, the crew of Horizons Call understood the chase had only just begun, and the galaxy itself would one day feel the echo of this pursuit. The ship had barely survived the escape. Sparks still hissed from broken panels. The hull groaned with every movement, and the engines burned hotter than they were ever meant to. The crew of Horizon's Call sat slumped in their seats, their bodies weak, but their eyes still fixed forward. They knew they had not outrun the ancient force. They had only bought themselves a few precious moments, and the weight of what followed pressed heavily on them all. Helena wiped sweat from her forehead, her voice low but steady. "Captain, we can't keep this up. The engines are tearing themselves apart. One more push and they'll collapse." Maria shook her head quickly, her fingers trembling over the controls, and the core is still unstable. We overloaded again, and the entire ship could go up. Ethan, pale and shaking, looked around at them. "So what do we do? Just wait for it to come and crush us." His voice broke halfway, the fear in his words sharp and raw. Oliver slammed his hand down against the railing, his teeth clenched. "No, we fight. We're not just going to sit here and die." But even he sounded unsure. The bridge was filled with the sound of heavy breathing, of exhaustion and fear that threatened to swallow them. John stood tall at the center, his eyes steady, though he felt the same terror in his chest. His voice cut through the silence, calm and firm. "We're going back to the barrier." The others stared at him, stunned. Maria blinked. "The barrier? Captain, it nearly destroyed us the first time, and now with the core damaged, we won't survive another crossing." Helena's eyes widened. "If we throw ourselves into that wall again, it'll rip us to pieces." John shook his head, his voice steady. "Or it will save us. If the barrier was built to keep this thing locked in, then maybe its energy is the only thing that can cut us free from it." There was silence. The logic was terrible and thin, but it was the only plan they had. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "So we're going to use the barrier against it." John nodded once. "We give it everything we have. Left one last gamble." Maria's hands moved quickly, though her voice trembled to even try. "We need to sync the engines with the barrier's frequency. That's not something humans were ever meant to do. If I get it wrong by even a second, the ship will be shredded." Helena looked at her, then at John. "And if we don't try, we're already dead." Her words were sharp. Cutting through the hesitation, Oliver grinned faintly, though it was more a baring of teeth than joy. Better to die fighting than waiting. John's gaze swept across his crew. He saw fear, but he also saw determination. "Then we make this count," he said firmly. "Everyone knows what they're risking. Everyone knows what's at stake. This is humanity's chance to prove we're not prey." As the ship turned, the void behind them shuddered. The ancient force surged closer, bending space like paper, massive shapes unfurling in the black. The crew felt the weight of its hunger, its interest. It knew what they were planning. And it was not going to let them go easily. The ship shivered, the lights flickered. And the walls bent under invisible strain. "It's on us," Helena cried, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's trying to pin us down," Oliver growled, gripping the weapons console, though he knew the guns were useless. "Let it try. We're not stopping." Maria's voice rose over the alarms, core at critical. "Any more stress and it will blow." John's voice was sharp, steady, unshaken. "Then let it blow behind us. We ride it until the very end." The barrier appeared ahead. A wall of light stretching across infinity, its colors rippling from blue to violet to burning white. It shimmered like a living sea, and as they drew closer, it flared brighter, almost as if it knew what chased them. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "It's beautiful." And terrifying. Helena's voice was grim. "Beautiful things in space usually kill you." The engine screamed. The hull rattled. The ship shook so hard it felt like it would rip in two. The ancient force pressed closer, its presence filling their minds with anger, hunger, and rage. Visions flooded them again. They saw themselves breaking, dying, their ship shattering. They saw humanity's future erased in flame. Ethan shouted, clutching his head. "It wants us to see our end," John barked back, his voice sharp and steady. "Then don't give it the satisfaction." Eyes forward, Maria's hands blurred. Over her console, her voice desperate, synchronizing with the barrier, adjusting the core's frequency. Helena's voice cracked as she pulled the ship into alignment. "We've got one shot at this. If I miss, we're gone." John's voice was like iron. "Then don't miss." The entity roared, not in sound, but in pressure. The void folded. Stars shattered. The ship was nearly torn apart as invisible claws of gravity closed around them. Oliver screamed through gritted teeth. "It's trying to drag us back." John shouted over the chaos. "Hold the course." The barrier flared. Ahead, blinding light flooding the bridge. Maria screamed. Synchronization complete. Now or never. John gave the order. Sharp and final, push through. Helena slammed the engines forward. The ship surged. The core screamed. The walls rattled like they would burst. The lights swallowed them whole. The presence shrieked. A roar of fury that split their minds open. The crew cried out, their bodies shaking under the pressure. For a moment, it felt like they were being torn into pieces. Like every part of them was being ripped apart by light. Ethan's scream echoed. "Through the bridge, it's inside us," Maria shouted back. "Hold on. We just need to hold." And then, in one blinding instant, everything snapped. The ship burst forward. The pressure tore away. The screams cut off. And there was only silence. The horizon's call was through. Battered, broken, half dead. But alive, the barrier's light fading behind them. The crew slumped in exhaustion. Their breaths ragged, their hearts still pounding. John looked around at them, his voice hoarse but steady. "We did it. We're free." But even as he spoke, the words carried no comfort, for each of them had felt it in the last moment before the light swallowed them. They had heard the entity's final thought. Not anger, not defeat, but recognition. You are different. And in that chilling truth, they knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning.